afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is May the 1st, 121st day of the year. Just 244 days remain to the year's over with. It's Learn to Ride a Bike Day. World Password Day. Think about those passwords you use every day to get into your computer systems. National Purebred Dog Day. School Principals Day. Save the Rhino Day. Couple Appreciation Day. Alman Mai is a festival that heralds the start of summer in Wales. It's a day that's got a rich history and tradition, strong connection to nature. On this particular day, Welsh communities come alive with various customs that have been popular through generations. National Mother Goose Day. National Black Barbershop Day. It's Barbershop Appreciation Day. Lay Day. National Chocolate Parfait Day. International Sunflower Gorilla Gardening Day. Global Love Day. Love yourself, love your friends, family. New Homeowners Day. Been there and done that a few times. Frequent Flyer Day. National Executive Coaching Day. Therapeutic Massage Awareness Day. National Loyalty Day. School Bus Drivers Day. Thank You Thursday. International Doodle Dog Day. Silver Star Service Banner Day. World Passkey Day. And May Day. With flowers blooming and the sun shining. It's a perfect day to dance around the maypole and celebrate springtime. Which is different than pole dancing. Let me assure you of that. International Workers' Day. National Day of Prayer. Law Day. National Stop Snoring Week. National Youth Violence Week. National Physical Education and Sports Week. And Vallenato Legend Festival. It's said to be the rhythm of Colombia's heart, drawing people together in a vibrant celebration of its culture. I've only been to Colombia once or twice, and got a unique culture all its own. Alrighty, let's turn to what's in the news now. Well, Harris did it again. Word salad. She made her return to the political scene with a speech, and she's mocked about remarks about the zoo animals. It drew something of an awkward silence. She digressed about elephants during an earthquake. She urged the Democrats to act like elephants. And many of them are, literally defecating on everything in sight. Well, violent terrorist gangs are pushing north. As a result of the deportation push, a lot of the violent gangs that have invaded America are actually pushing north now, which are threatening our northern border states. Louisiana Willow says had Trump's border crackdown come sooner, it could have saved families like hers from being torn apart. Her husband, Wesley Hayes, was killed October 2024. in a drunk driving crash involving a migrant who, frankly, shouldn't have been here. And under Biden, it was come on down. And now, there's a major effort underway to send them back to their homes. Well, Hunter Biden has dropped his suit against the IRS. He filed suit saying whistleblowers had, two specifically, had talked about his private life. IRS Special Agent Gary Shapley and IRS Criminal Investigator Joseph Ziegler had targeted and sought to embarrass him through statements to the media about details of tax matters. And since he was a private citizen, that should have been verboten. Now, Steve, let's see. Marco Rubio has revealed an obscure Biden administration office that very few people knew about. This office kept a disinformation dossier on Trump officials. It was revealed during a cabinet meeting that Biden administration's State Department kept dossiers on Americans accused of serving as vectors of disinformation. He said during the cabinet meeting, we had an office in the Department of State whose job it was to censor Americans. Now, Bill Belichick is in the news a lot. His daughter-in-law is attacking his girlfriend. Now, Belichick, you got to admire him. He's got a 24-year-old girlfriend. The sad thing is, his daughter doesn't like it. He needs to find an older lady and settle down and shut up, is the daughter's attitude. Well, there's a new caffeine trend that is offering surprising health benefits. Mushroom coffee, a substitute for your morning caffeine fix. Well, Hexeth is sending a strong message to Iran and the Houthis. You're going to pay, you know what the U.S. military is capable of doing. Iran is the power behind the Houthis, and they keep attacking ships. Quite often they pick the wrong ship. In fact, they attacked one of our carriers. He warned Iran, you'll pay the consequence at the time and place of our choosing. Well, the Made in America loan cap has been doubled under the new Trump-backed manufacturing push. Going to boost domestic manufacturing by doubling the capital small business can access. Manufacturing loans have increased by 74% during the first 100 days of President Trump's administration. Proponents of this new measure say by doubling the limit from $5 million to $10 million for 7A and 504 loans geared toward small manufacturing companies, may not be able to borrow traditional banks, these small businesses are able to invest more in their workforce and their products alike. Well, let's see. According to Greg Gutfeld, Democrats are missing the point. And they're going to keep missing the point till they figure out what's going on. Well, sometimes you get so excited about what you're watching, you don't watch what's around you. Our baseball fans just fell 21 feet from the stands at a Pirates-Cub game. Fell down to the warning track. He's in critical condition. Happened at the bottom of the 7th inning, right field, known as the Clemente Wall, in honor of Roberto Clemente. Man appeared to cheer Pirates star Andrew McCutcheon's 2-run double when he flipped over the guardrail and hit the ground. Medical personnel immediately went to address the issue. Well, New England investigators are not ruling out the possibility of a serial killer. The 11 bodies have been found in that region since March. Treasury Secretary says that the U.S. has the upper hand in the tariff game with China. Well, during the attendance at the Vatican for the Pope's funeral, President Trump met with President Zelensky. That was the first face-to-face meeting since their Oval Office confrontation in February. Trump said he told him it's a good thing if we can produce a deal, that you sign it because Russia's much bigger and much stronger. And folks wouldn't be so hesitant about donating to this war effort if Zelensky wasn't buying billion-dollar properties in other countries. There's also the possibility a lot of that money went into kickbacks to Democratic elected officials so that Zelensky could pass the hat. Now, he's finding the money spigot is being tightened up drastically. Well, it looks like AirPods, MacBooks, and Apple Watches are up to 30% off on Amazon right now. When you go buy my books that are on Amazon and Kindle, look under Ken Hudnall. And I've got 4 or 5 more going up in the next few days. Richard Gere and his wife are coming back. They don't get the kowtowing in Spain that they get here. Richard Gere and Alejandra Silva moved to Spain at the end of 2024 when they wanted to get away from Trump. Now they're coming back. Florida's going to execute an Army veteran who was convicted of killing his girlfriend and 3 young children. He'll be the 4th person to be executed in Florida so far this year. Texas is putting in an express lane. Part of the problem has been that the very idea of punishing somebody for committing a crime has become something of the past. If you look at the revolving door in California and New York, school choice supporters protest the exclusion of religious charter in a Supreme Court case. The court's being asked to weigh whether a religious charter school is entitled to the same treatment funding as a secular one. There's a question about whether public funds should go directly to religious schools. Protesters marched outside and held signs that said all students, all options, all dollars, and free to learn. They want expanded access to alternatives to traditional public schools for students who struggle in those settings. Well, having 5 degrees and things that we took for granted when I went to school are almost considered a foreign language to students today. The standards have certainly had the bar lowered. 180-year-old Christian University in South Carolina is going to close after a $6 million fundraiser fell short. Limestone University. It's going to help students transfer to other schools. It's a private Christian university. It raised about $2.1 million from nearly 200 donations during a 2-week fundraising program. They needed $6 million to continue its own campus and online programs. Its online and in-person enrollment dropped from 3,200 students in 2014 to about 1,600, according to the state higher education data. Several hundred professors and support staff are going to lose their jobs as part of the closure. Students and faculty believe the school's financial problems could have been addressed sooner. According to Emma Knapp, a student, they were spending money they shouldn't have been spending. And the problem didn't happen overnight. The school was $30 million in debt, and all the students wondered how they were going to get out of it. And with finals coming up, it's been a stressful period. Limestone was founded in Gaffney in 1845. It's going to hold its final commencement ceremonies on Saturday. Well, that's typical of the short-sightedness of higher education. There's a new cancer test that pinpoints disease better than the PSA options. Simple urine test has got key advantages over long-time PSA blood analysis. Former Air Force major defied Biden's vaccine mandate, is applauding Hex's. Hex's fight to reinstate military members is a big morale boost. She was a 16-year veteran and former Air Force major. Voluntarily left the military when she refused to get the COVID-19 vaccination. Former intelligence officer and judge advocate officer. Pregnant at the time the Biden administration issued the executive order, and she said she spent her entire adult life in the military. But because of the pregnancy, she was afraid to take the COVID-19 vaccine. A woke hospital could be in the crosshairs of President Trump's administration after a complaint alleges DEI discrimination. America First Legal has accused Henry Ford Health of using federal money to promote D&I initiatives. It's a pro-Trump legal nonprofit that has filed the official complaint with the Department of Health and Human Services. The complaint was filed to the Civil Rights Office of Health and Human Services, charges Henry Ford Health has implemented, institutionalized an organization of race and sex-based discrimination under the banner of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was a sad day for this country. Florida woman escapes a storage container she was being held in after being assaulted. David Earl Gibson, 40, is being investigated in connection with the murder of the victim's mother-in-law. Was found beaten to a pulp. He was apprehended in a wooded area in Washington County after a woman he allegedly assaulted and held in a storage container escaped. The woman was beaten and needed medical attention when emergency medical services and law enforcement responded to the scene. The victim said that he came to her residence, became irate, and started attacking her. Then he bound and gagged her while beating her and threatened to kill her. Well, allegedly used her mother-in-law's vehicle to take her to his residence, where he continued to abuse her. It was the victim's mother-in-law that he killed. It wasn't his own mother-in-law. Okay. The saint, who is from Maryland, who is in the El Salvador prison, that is being feted and honored and visited by Democrats. There's now other allegations against him. Turns out that there was more than one protective order filed. This was all covered up by the Democrats, of course. Yes, he should be honored and brought back on Air Force One. He's such a wonderful person. Well, the Texas highway has turned into a treasure hunt. Somehow, 8 million dimes were spilled onto this highway. Alfred Fire Department officials confirmed that 8 million loose dimes are being carried by a tractor trailer when it overturned on Highway 287 in Wise County, Texas. Texas Department of Public Safety said the truck veered off the road, overcorrected, and flipped. That had happened in El Paso. All the dimes would have been scooped up before they even hit the ground. All right, we've been talking in the last show about unexplained disappearances. Every year, in excess of 600,000 people vanish in a puff of smoke, figuratively speaking. Nobody has any idea what happens to them, and in most cases, they're never seen again. And some of the cases are absolutely bizarre. Now, many of the disappearances are absolutely baffling. Somebody walks out the door but never gets past the threshold. They seemingly disappear in mid-step. One of the most baffling cases I read about involved a couple that was 62 years old. It was Edward Andrews and his wife Stephanie. Both very active. This happened in 1970. They've been married about 6 or 7 years. Owned a home in Arlington Heights, a suburb of Chicago. So they weren't poor folks. They weren't scraping by. They were comfortable, which for Chicago meant that they had disposable income. They're both still working, but they're going to retire at the end of that year. So they had a lot to look forward to. Everything seemed to come to a halt for him May 15th, 1970. It was a Friday. They had breakfast together, got ready to go to work. Edward was an executive with Miller Peerless Manufacturing, and Stephanie was a credit investigator for local loan. Every morning they commuted to downtown Chicago. And their car wasn't a rattle trap, it was a 1969 Oldsmobile. And this happened in 1970. So it wasn't a junker. And when they did their morning commute, they wanted to avoid the high-speed driving necessary to use the expressway, so they took the lakefront route, which is longer, but scenic. So he dropped her off at her office, went on to his job. By all accounts, all the witnesses, Edward's morning was uneventful. Left his office at lunchtime to meet up with two of his friends, both executives with a company he used to work with. We're going to eat at a Pizzeria Uno, which was a Chicago favorite for pizza. But as they were sitting at the restaurant, he started to feel ill. He didn't really eat anything. One of the men he was with said he just lit a cigarette. Suddenly turned pale. But as they sat there and talked, he started to look and feel better. Even drove his two friends to the train station. Made it back to his office with no problem. Later that afternoon, one of his employees noticed he didn't look all that well. At one point, he folded his arms on his desk and put his head down, something none of them ever seen him do before. But then he bounced back again, left work at 5 p.m. and picked up his wife as usual. They didn't go straight home after work that day. We're going to a cocktail party being held at the Sheraton Chicago Hotel. 70 supervisors giving her 2 tickets for the event, being sponsored by the Chicago chapter of the Women's Association of the Allied Beverage Industry. So they got to the party a little after 5:30 and started to make their way through the crowd, stopping to chat to a lot of people they knew. Edward seemed to completely recover from whatever had bothered him earlier, and both of them appeared to be in a good mood, and neither of them was a heavy drinker. And each enjoyed a couple of cocktails along with some of the canapes that were being passed around. After a few hours, Edward said he didn't feel well and he was overheard complaining to his wife he was hungry, which made sense because he hadn't had any lunch. And there wasn't a whole lot of food at the cocktail party. It was about 9:30 when the couple left the party and headed for the hotel parking garage where they'd left their car. Parking attendant saw them when they got off the elevator and started walking over to their car. And he said he was a little surprised at their appearance because both of them seemed to have trouble walking straight. He and the manager of the garage, Anthony Morelli, watched the company closely as they actually had to struggle to get into the car. The parking attendant mentioned he didn't think Edward ought to be driving in his condition. But Edward started the car and said he was fine. Well, he put the car in gear and headed for the exit, which is about 10 feet away. And as the two parking attendants watched, Edward drove directly into the side of the garage door. And Anthony rushed over to examine the damaged door and looked into the car, told Edward he was obviously in no condition to drive, and Stephanie, who was actually in tears, nodded in agreement. Both of them begged Edward to get out of the car, but he refused to listen. Backed the car up, aligned it with the center of the garage door, and sped away. Well, the exit he took led him out to Michigan Avenue, one of the main roads in the city. And for several blocks on the other side of the Chicago River, Michigan Avenue has 2 layers. And the city used double and triple decker highways as a way of saving space. And when the couple left a parking garage that had been on the lower level, and the two parking attendants watched as the car turned south on Michigan Avenue and disappeared from view. And that was the last time anybody saw either Edward or Stephanie. Well, it's not clear what happened to the Andrews after they left the cocktail party that Friday. They didn't get back home, that's for sure. They didn't have any children, had no weekend plans, so it wasn't until Monday that when they failed to show up for work that anybody began to realize that something was wrong. Both of them are conscious employees who seldom missed work and would always call before taking any time off. And once it became clear nobody was able to get in touch with them, police were called. Edward's sister, Helen Weller, was at a loss for words, and neither Edward or Stephanie were the type to go away without saying something to somebody. Well, the Arlington Heights police were dispatched to the couple's home. Everything appeared in perfect order. No sign of the couple. Several days' newspapers piled up on the front lawn, and it looked like they hadn't checked their mailbox for several days. One of the neighbors had a spare key to their home, unlocked the door for the police, and nobody knew what to expect once they got inside. House was quiet, appeared empty, everything in perfect order. And the fact there were still some plates and grapefruit rinds on the dining room table led investigators to believe that they'd never made it home from the cocktail party. Except for those dishes, which Stephanie probably planned to take care of when she got home Friday night. There was nothing out of the place in the house and no indication any kind of struggle had taken place. Investigators determined that Stephanie's cosmetics and jewelry were in the house. Edward's shaving supplies were there as well. So clearly they weren't planning on a trip of any sort. Coupled with the fact none of their clothes appeared to be missing, police took this to mean the pair hadn't simply taken off on an impromptu vacation. Nobody had any idea what happened to the couple, but they were pretty sure the answer wasn't going to be found in the house. Well, so investigators began interviewing family, friends, and colleagues for the couple, trying to get a better understanding of what was going on when the pair went missing. Friends said the couple had a good marriage, no problem anybody was aware of. Both very neat and orderly people. Both took pride in their appearance and their home. Even one of Edward's ex-wives had nothing but good things to say about him. Told investigators he was responsible and conscientious, not the kind of man who would abandon his job. They weren't wealthy, but as I said earlier, they were comfortable. Some of the neighbors said they barely knew the couple, but would often see them leaving their home all dressed up, so they assumed they were attending lots of parties, which was an accurate determination. They loved to socialize and often went out to various events, although they also enjoyed entertaining people in their homes. Well, even though the investigation didn't turn up anything, Edward's own sister injected some drama into the case. She said Edward had been keeping secrets from people. Stephanie and her family were under the impression Edward had been married 4 times in the past, but his sister said he'd actually been married 6 or 7. Even odder, she refused to clarify the exact number and provided no proof of these allegations. But it didn't look like any of Edward's ex-wives had anything to do with his disappearance. It soon became clear nobody had any contact with him after they left that cocktail party that Friday evening. And as far as the detectives could determine, the 2 men had been working in the parking garage and been the last to see the couple, but their description of what had taken place when Edward hit the garage door was disturbing. They were able to positively identify the couple from pictures the police showed them. They were absolutely certain it was Edward and Stephanie that they witnessed staggering in the parking garage before slamming into the garage door and taking off on Michigan Avenue. On the other hand, relatives and friends of the couple are absolutely certain the garage employees were mistaken. Everyone swore the couple were not heavy drinkers. They had been displaying any signs of intoxication when they left the cocktail party. And Edward is also very particular about his cars. In If he'd hit something, his friends all said he would have immediately jumped out and inspected the damage. Now, the garage didn't have any surveillance cameras, so there's no way police could absolutely be certain the staggering couple had been Edward and Stephanie. But they believed it was them. The garage employees actually described them both the couple and their Oldsmobile. Well, some of the people who'd been at the cocktail party told investigators Edward had looked as if he wasn't feeling particularly well before leaving the hotel. His co-workers, as well as the two friends he'd gone to lunch with, were able to provide some more details. That raised the possibility maybe Edward had a heart attack that evening, and the ill feeling he'd experienced throughout the day had been a warning sign that he failed to pay attention to. But until Edward could be located, there was no way they could know for sure. But it certainly seemed like something was going on with his health that day. They knew the couple had made it back to the car that evening, and there was nothing in their home to indicate they'd even returned there after the cocktail party. So whatever happened to the couple appeared to have happened to them while they were on the road. It was possible they'd run into car trouble, so investigators began going over every possible route the couple could have taken to go home. Helicopters were brought in to search from the air, and they carefully checked for any evidence to indicate their car had skidded off the road, and flying over parking lots looking for the missing Oldsmobile. Nobody could find any sign of the couple or their car. Two garage employees had told police Edward had headed north on the lower level of Michigan Avenue when he exited the garage, but it was thought maybe in his confused state he might have gotten into the southbound lane instead. Heading the wrong way down the highway would have put him on a risk of having a head-on collision, but there were no accidents reported that night. But if you realized he was going the wrong way, he would have had to wait till he got off the bridge over the Chicago River before he could have done a U-turn. Now, investigators did find a couple of areas on East Wacker Drive, which crossed Michigan Avenue right near the bridge. But there was enough space in the guardrail for a car to drive through, and they could tell from scrape marks on the guardrail that had been hit more than once in the past. But there was also some tire prints that seemed to be fairly recent. So the Chicago police, and just to be cautious, drug the river near that location, but found nothing. Investigators would eventually drag the river in several different spots. They found no trace of the missing people or their car. The river is only about 16 feet deep in that particular area where a car could have ended up. And there were no strong currents, so if a car goes in the river, it's not going to go upstream or downstream. Police believed that if a car had ended up in the river, it would have quickly sunk down to the riverbed in the same general area where it entered the river. After their attempts to locate the car were unsuccessful, some of the investigators believed that meant the car had not ended up in the Chicago River. But if they weren't in the river, where'd they go? Hard to believe that two adults and a car could vanish without leaving a single clue behind. And that's the point I'm making about the mysterious disappearances. It's like they just drive off the planet. Investigators considered the possibility the couple had been the victim of a robbery attempt and went horribly wrong. Now, they didn't usually carry large amounts of cash with them, but they did have 13 or 14 different credit cards. So police monitored them for any activity, but neither their bank account nor any of their credit cards were touched. Bank statements showed the couple normally left most of their money in the bank. They hadn't made any unusual withdrawals in the 2 months leading up to the disappearance. That fact alone made it very unlikely the pair decided to just run off and get a new life somewhere else. If they were still alive, clearly they weren't spending any money. Well, detectives weren't sure what jurisdiction the couple had gone missing from, so both the Arlington Heights Police Department and the Chicago Police Department were working on the case. But even with their combined skills, the investigation stalled. No reported sightings of the couple, no trace of that car. They ruled out the idea the pair had voluntarily left, and they didn't have any evidence that there's any foul play involved. They thought it was most likely that the couple had been involved in an accident, but they haven't been able to determine where. Time and again, detectives returned to the river. Looked like the most logical explanation is only a block from the hotel where the cocktail party had been held. And if Edward had been sick as people had described, investigators couldn't imagine him getting very far. Taking him 2 tries to get the car out of the parking garage. If he had misjudged how much room he had to make a U-turn off the bridge, he wouldn't have gotten a second chance. Well, in April of 1971, police searched the river again, this time with sonar equipment. They hoped the new equipment would be able to detect something they had missed in the early searches. But again, they came up with nothing. So in November of 1971, they obtained more sophisticated sonar equipment and did another search. Once again, they were unsuccessful in finding anything related to the missing couple. They still felt the river held the answers they were looking for, but after failing to find anything useful, they forced themselves to move on and consider different options. So a search team went and dredged a pond in Des Plaines, Illinois. After somebody suggested the couple and their car had ended up there. They did find 3 cars in the pond, but none of them with the Oldsmobile they were looking for. So they ran out of leads and the case went cold. For the most part, the case dropped out of headlines. Edward and Stephanie and their 1969 Oldsmobile seemed to literally vanish without a trace. Local newspapers usually publish a short recap of the case every year on the anniversary of the couple's disappearance, and this would often result in a couple of tips being called in to the detectives, but generally these tips were led nowhere. By the mid-1980s, there was a movement to revitalize downtown Chicago. In addition to all the work that's been done on the roads and the buildings, the city decided to do a general cleanup of the Chicago River. It was a massive undertaking, and they dredged up tons of trash, bottles, abandoned shopping carts. They also discovered cars in the river, 12 of them actually. But once again, none of them were the Oldsmobile they were looking for. The Chicago River had been a focal point for the Andrews investigation for a long time. If the river held the answer to the mysterious disappearance, though, it was keeping it well hidden. Well, by 1994, there were a lot of folks living in Chicago never heard of Edward and Stephanie Andrews. Detectives who recently worked on the case were retired, and the case hadn't been mentioned in the newspaper for years. But for the relatives of the missing couple, the memory and the pain of loss had gone away. They were certain the pair were long dead and never stopped hoping they'd someday get to give them a proper burial. And in July of 1994, it looked like they might get that chance. A 36-year-old man who was only 12 at the time the couple went missing went to law enforcement and told him he knew what had happened to Edward and Stephanie. Now, the detectives were skeptical and listened to what he had to say, though. He claimed the couple had been killed on the night they'd gone missing. Their bodies had been put in the trunk of their car and submerged in a pond near Green Oaks, Illinois. He said this murder had been committed by a group of young men who liked to cause trouble in the city in the 1970s. He said he'd been at the pond the night they disposed of the car. When he was asked why he waited more than 20 years to come forward with that information, told investigators he'd been stricken with amnesia. At that point, they were pretty sure his story wasn't going to hold up, but it was the first lead they'd gotten on the case in over 20 years, so they reopened the case and began trying to verify the information the young man had given them. Now, there were parts of his story that just didn't make any sense. But there were enough verifiable facts included. They decided that they needed to search the pond in question. So a group of police officers and firefighters began the process of searching through the pond. And they did locate something buried in the muck at the bottom of the pond, but they couldn't determine what it was and didn't have the equipment necessary to do a full-blown salvage operation. So they marked the location of what they had found, about 10 feet from the edge of the pond, and called off the search while investigators made arrangements for Robert Chapman, a salvage expert from Milwaukee, to come out to the location. He was considered one of the best salvagers around, and he and his company successfully located submerged airplanes and more than 50 sunken ships. Well, Roger showed up and spent more than 2 hours in the water with a police diver before determining whatever was in the water, though it was metal, was not a car. And although the investigators were disappointed, they really hadn't been all that confident about that man's information to begin with. Of course, for Edward and Stephanie's relatives, this was a Their hopes were dashed again. Upon search would be the last push to find the remains of the couple. Investigation no longer considered active, as both of them would be over 110 years old by 1994. So there's no chance that they're still alive. I mean, when they vanished from Chicago, Edward was 62. His wife, Stephanie, was also 62 at the time. Now, while they know they're not alive, they couldn't be alive, they would like to know what happened to them. And search after search after search has revealed nothing. Now, this is an example of the type of absolutely baffling disappearances we're going to be talking about over the next few shows. There's been a lot of unexplained disappearances over the years. There have been, for example, Flight 19, 5 TBM Avenger warplanes that have, they went on a training mission and never came back. Now, when you look at unexplained disappearances, of course, top of the list would be the entire Roanoke colony. Virginia Dare, the first English-born child of the Americas. Then we have Owen Parfitt. He's not talked about very much. Disappeared off his sister's front porch in the English countryside. And while it's not as famous as, let's just say, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart, it's more mysterious. It was the summer of 1763. He was living with his sister in the town of Shepton Mallet in England. He was paralyzed. He was 60 years old, and he simply vanished. Now, being paralyzed, he wouldn't have walked off. But the farm workers working in the field across the road from the porch where he'd been sitting didn't see anything unusual. From their point of view, one minute he was there, the next minute he was gone. The other famous disappearance is Ambrose Bierce, the American author. He was the subject of a real-life mystery that'll never be solved. It was 1913. He was in his 70s. Told his family and friends he's going to Mexico and join Pancho Villa's revolution. Well, they know he arrived. He sent a few letters back from Mexico. But he was never heard from again. There was speculation he was killed in the battles. Others believe he might have committed suicide. Then we got Barbara Newhall Follett. She was a writer. Finished her first novel at the age of 8. By the time she turned 18, she had written 4 books. But because of the time and effort she put into her books, she never had a childhood. At the age of 25, she was regretful and depressed. December 7th, 1939, she got in an argument with her husband, walked out of the house, vanished. Never seen or heard from again. Body never found. How about Paula Jean Weldon, sophomore at Bennington College in December 1946? Told her roommate she's going out for a walk. Never came back. At one point, her father was suspected in the disappearance, but he was cleared. Over the next 10 years, a local Bennington man bragged to friends he knew where Paula's body was buried, but when push came to shove, he couldn't lead police to the gravesite. Her disappearance actually ranks as one of history's strangest unsolved mysteries. Then we have James Tetford, also from Bennington. In fact, Bennington's the site of several unsolved disappearances that took place in the 40s, including that of the wife of James Tetford. He claimed she went to the market, never came back. A few years later, in 1949, Tetford himself vanished without a trace, last seen on a crowded bus, sleeping in his seat. When the bus reached Bennington, Tetford was gone, though his belongings were left on the seat beside where he'd been sitting. He was never seen or heard from again. How about the MV Joyita, a merchant vessel? Departed Samoa for the Tokelau Islands. A few months later, she was found floating in the South Pacific, 600 miles off course. All her passengers, crew, and cargo were gone. Now, of course, a lot of folks believe the ship was the victim of piracy. Another theory is that the boat was taken on water, which it was listing when it was discovered, and the 25 people on board abandoned ship and were lost. Then we've got Patty Blau, Renee Bruhl, and Ann Miller. July 1966. 3 young women in bathing suits were seen to happily board a motorboat in Lake Michigan Beach. Crime reporter Dick Wiley, who delved deeply into the woman's backstory, believed they were taking the boat to visit a floating abortion clinic. There was said to be a floating abortion clinic on the lake. And it was thought the abortionists might have killed one girl and did away with the other 2 because they wouldn't leave any witnesses. But they left their money, their possessions, sitting on the beach. Their car was still there. Witnesses saw them go. But the boat was never found. Then we got the Sarah Joe, a small boat. It's February 1979. 5 friends departed the coast of Maui for a fun day of fishing on a small boat named the Sarah Joe and motored directly into one of Hawaii's worst storms on record. When it didn't come back, a massive search was conducted. But not surprisingly, nothing was discovered. Then things got weird. 10 years later, the Sarah Joe was found wrecked on the coast of one of the Marshall Islands, next to what turned out to be the grave of one of the 5 men who'd been on the boat. How did he get there? Who buried him? What happened to the other 4? Well, no sign of them. Then we got Keith Reinhardt. This mystery starts when Tom Young, one day in 1987, took his dog for a walk near Silver Plume, Colorado, and vanished. He'd been renting retail space in town, was then rented to Keith Reinhardt. This new tenant found Young's story so intriguing, he'd been writing a novel about in which the main character was a composite of both Young and Reinhardt. In 1988, a week after Young's body was found by hunters with a shot to the head, it was assumed it was suicide. Reinhardt went for a hike, never returned. He also mysteriously vanished. Well, in regard to Tom Young, what happened to the dog? Then we got Jody Husentwit, Iowa news anchor, disappeared from the parking lot of her apartment complex June 27, 1995. At 4:10 in the morning, She was heading for work. She did the morning news. The signs of a struggle, and some of her belongings were found strewn on the ground beside the car, including 2 shoes, 2 earrings, and her car keys. Although a partial palm print and a hair were recovered from the scene, her fate still remains unknown. Roy Griecar, homicide prosecutor in Center County, Pennsylvania, told his girlfriend he's going to take a day off from work for a drive to Lewisburg, which is about 50 miles away. He's hoping to enjoy a day of shopping and strolling. Well, this was April 15, 2005. April 16th, his car was found by a state trooper in the Lewisburg parking lot. Laptop was found 6 months later under a bridge. Hard drive was gone. Hard drive was found several months later, too damaged to be read. Other than that, not a single trace of Griecar had been found. In 2011, he was declared dead. Brian Schaefer, 27-year-old Ohio State medical student, vanished April 1st, 2006. That night, security cameras showed him entering a Columbus bar with his friends, but it never showed him leaving. Family and friends who wondered if Schaefer was grieving the death of his mother intentionally slipped out of the bar, never to be heard from again, or if he intended to get away temporarily to clear his head and something terrible happened to him. Whatever may have been the cause of his disappearance, he was never seen again. Barbara Bullock, 55 years old, July 18, 2007, went for a hike with a family friend in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. According to the friend, named Jim Remiker, he and Barbara, a physically fit and experienced hiker, headed to an overlook where they stopped for a snack. Barbara walked back down the trail as Jim took one last look at the view, and she vanished. More than a decade later, her disappearance is still unsolved. And finally, let's talk about Lauren Spear, 20-year-old Indiana University student. Disappeared June 3rd, 2011. Disappeared after a night of partying with her friends. Despite leads that included the arrest and conviction of a man for killing another Indiana University student in 2015, Bloomington police have no updates on this young lady's disappearance. Her disappearance has been and continues to be the most heart-wrenching experience of their lives, her parents said. 7 years later, they continued their search for Lauren. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be talking about more mysterious disappearances tomorrow. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening. And try not to disappear.